and welcome to the BPD Bunch Brunch, where we get together with our favorite brunchy beverages to catch up, play games, and talk about all things BPD. I'm your host, Zanny, and today I am here with Celine. Celine, where are you coming from, and what's your brunchy beverage?
I'm coming from London, and my brunchy beverage is a oat milk hot chocolate in my fierce mug, which I love.
I am coming from Albuquerque, New Mexico in the US. I put some lemons in water and I'm drinking it because I drink too many caffeinated beverages. So I'm trying to cut back and do more water.
I also drink a lot of caffeinated beverages. Usually I come to brunch either with water or coffee, but I thought I'd go for something non-caffeinated too.
Ooh, it's fancy. I like it. Well, today, Selena and I are going to have a conversation about living with both borderline personality disorder and struggling with an eating disorder, because that is something that both of us have in our history. So to sort of set the scene, Celine, can you share a little bit about your BPD-ED journey?
So it started probably when I was a child, in small forms of self-harm where I would skip food or I'd purge, so make myself sick when I felt like I didn't deserve food. And that would usually be after a pretty nasty telling off from my dad, who was my sole caregiver. But I never really thought much of it. And growing up, we would really only have one meal a day because my dad didn't really do breakfast. And for some reason, he didn't really do lunch either. So I kind of didn't really see it as an issue for a long time because I was in an environment where probably my parent was displaying disordered eating behaviours. And then when I was in my 20s after a relationship breakup, it came about from me being depressed and not hungry around that time. And I lost a lot of weight sort of naturally, as you do when you're down and your appetite is suppressed. And that's when it became a problem, because then it was about the numbers on the scale and I wanted to keep it down and I wanted to keep it going down. And I liked how it felt when I saw that I'd lost weight and the comments that I would get. And that's when it became more of a sort of problem in its own right rather than a form of self-harm. So it was about 3 to 4 months after my BPD anxiety and depression diagnosis that I was then seen and treated for my eating disorder, which was diagnosed as EDNOS. So that stood for eating disorder not otherwise specified. The reason I was given for that was that I wasn't clinically underweight at the time, so they put me in a catch-all category. That's how it came about, and I had a couple of tough years with the eating disorder behaviours. I would say I'm recovered now from the behaviours, but I still struggle with the kind of thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting because my eating disorder journey was very intentional. I didn't even know what disordered eating really was until I learned about it in health class when I was in early years of high school. What was interesting about my health class was like they were just showing these really extremely emaciated people who were acting in these very, very extreme ways. And so I sat there going like, well, I just won't be that bad. That won't happen to me. I remember having this thought, like they were really unhealthy with it. They just couldn't control themselves and I'll do it better. Ha! Yeah. I ended up in partial inpatient hospitalization for it several times. In my mid-20s, I stopped acting on the behaviors really at all. By the end of my 20s, I would say I stopped really thinking about stuff. Like I used to have a real trouble looking at food and being incapable of not counting calories. So they would just like sort of show up in my mind. And now I don't do that at all. I have to work to think what something is. And that's pretty cool because I never thought that would happen.
Yeah, that's great. It's funny how your brain kind of reconditions when you really work at it.
Yeah, isn't that wild? How do you feel like the eating disorder behavior and the BPD overlapped or intertwined, or how did they affect each other for you?
I think my eating disorder is definitely almost like a branch off my BPD. So I sort of see it as a bit of an umbrella for borderline personality disorder being sort of The main one being emotional dysregulation and struggling to cope with those emotions and vocalize them and process them. With the eating disorder, I guess it started as a coping mechanism. It was a maladaptive coping mechanism for me, and a form of self-harm that I'd kind of seen my dad model. He went on a hunger strike when my mother broke up with him for 40 days. He didn't eat. And I was only 7 at the time, so I don't really remember it, but clearly it affected my subconscious in a way that that's what you do when you're sad, or to show people that you're in distress. And so it became sort of part of my normal coping mechanisms until it became a real issue. So for me, it definitely stems from my BPD. If I didn't have those problems regulating and communicating emotions, or if they weren't so suppressed when I was younger for someone else's needs, my primary caregiver's needs, I'm not sure that would have played out as it did. My CPTSD and my BPD tend to be my sort of main disorders, because I guess that's what I struggle with more day to day. But the ED does come and go in terms of how much it affects my life. But I think it definitely stems from my emotions and inability to process them. Now it's more me looking at myself feeling uncomfortable in my body, and perhaps that's a self-esteem or self-worth issue. It's definitely better than it was as I've worked on it in therapy, but it's still a problem, and I think it's less connected to my emotional state, although that will play a part.
Yeah.
What about you?
I think ADHD is kind of the originator of most of the things. And I think growing up in a time where it wasn't really well understood, like what ADHD really was. And so then I experienced a lot of invalidation as a result of that, which sort of led into BPD. But I had some body image issues as well. And I think sort of it started out as a way to try to, on the surface, to make myself look a certain way that I thought I'd be happy with. But I think really it was sort of driven by a need to control something, because it was so hard for me to control my emotions, control my attention. And it's almost like a form of emotion regulation sometimes. It's a substitute. When you don't have emotion regulation skills and you're a very sensitive person, sometimes like the eating disorder becomes the outlet for all of that.
100%. I would say I still struggle with wanting to act out by purging in the same way when I want to act out in self-harm. They tend to go together. So it's definitely, I see it as a maladaptive coping mechanism in a way to process or channel distress. I have a bit of a strange relationship with anger, and I don't really know where I'm at with it. I used to think that I didn't get angry, and I think maybe the acting out in ED behaviors and self-harm behaviors is maybe a result of me suppressing anger as a child.
I have definitely used eating disorder behavior almost like twisted revenge against people when they hurt my feelings. Sometimes if somebody hurt my feelings, I would be like, I'm going to go engage in eating disorder behavior, and that'll show you. Show you what? Like, now that I'm looking back on it, the logic just like, in the moment it made so much sense to me. It was like, I'm going to use the fact that you care about me against you. But like, then I would go do these behaviors often in secret. So it's not like they even knew, first of all. And second of all, I mostly was really only hurting myself.
The reason I was smiling while you were talking was I completely relate. And it's that, like you say, it's very much twisted thinking or backward thinking. And for me, I put myself in the sort of DBT diagram of emotion mind, rational mind or logic mind, and wise mind. When you're in fully emotion mind, you're not really engaging any of the logic. And that's why it can be so backward too. And I very much have the same streak of kind of, I don't like this side of myself, but that revenge side where you want to show someone by hurting yourself and that you do it. It just doesn't, the logic isn't there because you're in emotion mind. And it's something that I would say I feel quite a lot of shame about, this sort of desire to get revenge on people by hurting myself, because it's not effective. It's not very nice. It's very much emotion mind. And that's the way I sort of think about it is, that's what happens when I get into emotion mind, and that's because I'm highly distressed and my brain isn't rationalizing anything or operating in wise mind. And when I come back to wise mind, like we are in now, we can reflect and be like, that was so odd. It didn't make any sense. So completely relate with that.
Gosh, it's really weird to think about like the eating disorder stuff, because I really just unless I'm talking to someone about eating disorders, I almost don't think about it anymore. And like what is really left, I think, is more like just body dysmorphia, because I don't really engage in any disordered eating problems. But it is wild. The body dysmorphia is wild. Like, I've learned that when I'm taking pictures of myself, I have to, like, the best strategy for me is to take pictures of myself and not look at them for like a couple of days. And then, because if I look at them immediately, it's like I'm looking in the mirror and I will see all kinds of features exaggerated. But if I wait a couple of days, it's almost, even though it's still me, it's almost like I'm looking at pictures of somebody else. And I can see them more clear-headed.
That's a really good strategy.
Yeah, it's what I discovered it on accident, because I took a bunch of pictures and then I got distracted and I didn't look at them, and I was like, wow, I look so much better than I thought I did on the day I took these pictures. What's happening? And then I just kept like doing that on purpose, and I was like, oh,
that's good. I try to remind myself with affirmations I've heard from other people who I value. Just remind myself, like, it's normal for your body to fluctuate. It's normal for it to change as I get older. So in my 30s, my metabolism is going to slow down, and sort of just reminding myself that. And just so I have a really good phrase from my little sister who's 15, and she says, your clothes are supposed to fit your body, not the other way around. So your body's not supposed to fit your clothes are supposed to fit your body. So that encourages me to just maybe buy a bigger size or change some of the things, the sort of style of clothes that I'm wearing. So that's how I tend to cope with it.
Our bodies are always changing, ultimately. We are in control of our hygiene and in our food intake to some degree, but like, our appearance is going to keep changing, because as we get older, our body changes. And I think accepting that however I look right now is not how I'm going to look, next year, 5-10 years from now. Like, I think I just had this realization one day where it was like, I'm working so hard to look a certain way, but even if I achieve it and, keep doing all the things to maintain it, my body's going to keep changing of its own, just because we're alive. Like, we have a life cycle. Like, I'm not going to look 25 forever. I don't look 25 anymore. I'm in my mid-30s, right? So I think that helped me to let go of the need to try to control it so much, because it was like, that's a losing battle, and working more on the self-acceptance, trying to be okay with doing the right things regardless of how I feel about my body in that moment. Because I may not always love my body, but I can at least appreciate what it does for me and accept that it gets me places.
Acceptance has definitely been a big part of my journey as well. It was quite a big realization on how much our bodies change, not just as a human being, but as a woman. And I'm a lot more accepting of the way my body might change week to week within a month cycle now, because I know that we have seasons, whether they be, in a decade or in a month, that your body is going to fluctuate and change. And that's been a big part of my journey as well.
Thank you, everyone, so much for watching. I hope you got a nugget of wisdom to take with you on your journey. If you think this is a topic that you'd like us to explore further, definitely let us know in the comments. We can make this a full-length main episode with more cast members and information in our 4th season next time. So let us know what you think. And make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notifications so you don't miss a single episode. And we will see you next time. Bye.